Welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast. My name is Steve, and I am your host for this podcast about the history of the popes of Rome and Christian Church. Today we have a quick Q&A episode that was the question and answer period or section of the live stream that I recently did on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you missed those two on Facebook or YouTube, the live stream, here is the Q&A portion. I will release the episode that I produced or recorded during that session shortly, and it's on the history of book publication, and I think you really won't want to miss that. I really love doing the live stream event, and I hope to do them a lot more. It was a really great opportunity to talk with you guys and really interact more so than just in a regular episode. So definitely look forward to more of those. If you want to ask questions in advance of a live stream event, or if you want to learn more about the live stream events, please go to the website a2zhistorypage.com. Email me, Steve at a2zhistorypage.com, and look for us on Facebook and Twitter and all of that. And I definitely look forward to talking to you soon. All right. Well, thank you for listening to that part. I hope you've stuck in that far. Let's see if we've come up with some questions here. So we do have some comments. We have a comment that says, it looks like the history of Byzantium's doing one as well. That's awesome. I will address one question that I got on Facebook, and I'll bring that up really quickly on Facebook. Give me 1 second. I got this a couple of, maybe yesterday, but I thought it was a really, really powerful question that I wanted to answer that really didn't have anything to do about this topic per se today, but I thought I would address it today. So let me call it up here. And the person's name who did it, her name is Laureen. And so thank you very much, Laureen. She asked a question about the hoax of the doctrine of discovery that stole lands globally. And I'm assuming she's talking about native lands. And the doctrine of discovery was something, I think that the actual term was coined by a Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court about uses of land taken, if you could say, from the Native Americans, and how that was pretty much okay. What it comes from is I'll focus and really on the first part of that question and where it really developed out of, and that was, and what also that Supreme Court justice, I think he also quoted back to this document called the Treaty of Tordesillas between Portugal and Spain, all the way back in 1494. And there was a couple of treaties between Spain and Portugal that had been made previous to this. And Spain and Portugal, as we know, they were for the first two countries, states, if you will. Let's not start slicing if they were proper states or not. But these two burgeoning nation states, they were the first to really go out and discovering, if you will. They were going to look for spices and trade goods out of the traditional places that Europeans had gone to get them. They went to places like Macau and India and Malacca. And as we well know, that Christopher Columbus went to the New World. So this Treaty of Tordesillas that drew a line, and they didn't know what these lines were, and they didn't. Christopher Columbus himself probably actually did have an inkling of where he actually was, but a lot of the other ones, he didn't, but they certainly didn't know everything or probably half of what they were going to find out pretty shortly after Columbus. But what the Treaty of Tordesillas said is that within certain longitudes, Spain had an exclusive claim and Portugal had an exclusive claim to lands. And that didn't say if France, if you went to go look for something, or England, they didn't care about them. They didn't count. The papacy went ahead and put their stamp on this Treaty of Tordesillas with a papal bull, or an official papal document called Inter Caetera. The Pope who actually said this was Pope Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope. He put his stamp on this. But in 1494, I mean, what did they? I don't even know if Columbus's second voyage had started even at that point. The interesting thing is, I think I've really, really wanted to look at the people and what they're thinking at this time. And the Spanish and the Portuguese, they had gone through an 800-year time period of pretty much constant warfare. The last Muslim kingdom in Spain hadn't been taken back by the Spanish crown until 1492, not very long before Columbus sailed to the New World. And so they were very much in this mindset of conquest, and land meant everything. They had developed cultural institutions of everything that was meant to conquer land. So that's the mindset that they came with. Every place that they went to was they knew how to set up government and institutions to take and control land, even if they were a small minority. And that's what they did in places like the New World. They would make landfall, co-opt local government, conquer it, kill, whatever they needed to do most efficiently to control that land. I mean, you look at the places where the Spanish conquered, and you would never, I mean, on paper, the technological advances that they had were pretty small over groups like the Aztecs and the Incas. Like gunpowder weapons. Their gunpowder weapons weren't that great, and their strategic advantages really didn't come into play in the New World. Things like the tercios were more used in Europe than they ever were in the New World. They just knew how to work with certain groups to play them against other groups, and that's what they did with the Aztecs and groups like that. As time progressed, then things changed. I think that, so I'm obviously not condoning any of the activities that they did, but they had a cultural purpose, and they had their own motivations for doing those conquests. And groups throughout time have done that. I mean, land conquest, the Mongols, every group has tried, or most every group has tried to conquest more land, even amongst the native groups. I was reading about the Senecas, who they were mostly from the western side of central New York. So if you're familiar with your New York geography, around the area of Rochester, and nowadays their real central location is in western New York. But during the 1600s, they had pushed out a group called the Eries. So we see this in people all across the country that have just done all sorts of things, all across the world, who've done this sort of things. Were the Spanish more brutal than most? They probably in many cases were, but that was really because a lot of it was because of the cultural context that they came out of. So I hope that answered the question. Like I said, I'm obviously no expert in these things, but these are just my musings, and I'd love to hear any rejoinders that anybody would have from any of that. We have a comment from Facebook and from Sandra, and she says, do you know what type of ink or paint was used to create the Book of Kells or other illuminated manuscripts? They're beautiful. I'm thinking that the more of the oil-based paints were used for those. I haven't delved too deeply into those illuminated manuscripts, but that's going to be probably in the next episode or the one after that. There was like I said, there was a huge jump in technology in book manufacture into the Middle Ages. So that's definitely one that we'll talk about soon. And I appreciate that question. All right, a good friend of the show, a longtime friend, Yasin. Sandra is also a good friend of the show, too. It's nice to see you on here. So Yasin asks, hi, Steve. My question is, do we know what material the books in the Library of Alexandria were made of? Greetings from Toronto. So, hey, we're not too far away, but we couldn't see each other at the current moment, the way things are going. A couple of weeks ago, we probably could have, but not right now. But that's an excellent question. Most of those would have been written on, a lot of them would have been written on papyrus, depending on where they were from, though. Those books in the Library of Alexandria could have been written on parchment. Parchment was really old at the time of papyrus. Papyrus and parchment were both used at the same time in the ancient world. It really depended on where the book was or the scroll was created. If it was created in a place where that you couldn't get access to that material, then they did have, most places were able to make parchment. There was a legend, I didn't put it in the episode as such, that parchment was created in Pergamum in Anatolia, and that had kind of a mythological beginning, but scholars don't really put it was much credence into that. It was just sort of a technology. Really, when you get down to brass tacks, it wasn't that hard to make parchment. It was hard to actually make it, but the process of developing the technology wasn't that difficult, and it was something that could be done a lot of different places. So my guess is that it would have been a combination, and especially during different times, there might have been more parchment or more papyrus. Probably getting into the later part of antiquity, you would have saw more parchment, just because parchment was viewed as more of a higher class good. Probably a lot to do with that durability. Also, parchment, we'll get into this into later episodes. Papyrus would wear down it could wear down quickly. If you were, so your parchment on a scroll, you'd unroll it, and that's just it's constantly flexing on those fibers. So not only just the fibers of the actual plant, but then those strips put together that have been glued together, they're going to break apart as they dry, and the ink would have a tendency to get smudged off. So kind of papyrus was being used less, and parchment was starting to be used more. Oh, we've got a good friend, Antonio, who I'm sad to say we were going to actually meet up last week, but because of what happened, if you're watching this right now, I mean, we're all in quarantine right now, and I was going to visit with Antonio in his home, but hopefully soon. And Antonio asks, What ancient book would you like to read during the quarantine? I guess for me, I mean, I'd like to read all of them. I'd like to read the one that we don't know existed. That would be that would be a fun one. Uh, Maybe a very first written edition of the Gospel of Mark, like hot off the presses of Mark, would be interesting to read and see if he included that last column that doesn't show up in the Codex Vaticanus or the Codex Sinaiticus. Uh, Something like that. I think that would be really fun to crack, to unroll, if you will, because I'm thinking Mark was probably written in scroll format at first, and it would have been put into codex form later on. So yeah, if I was in an ancient world, I'd probably be looking at a scroll, and my scroll would either be something like completely off the wall, like the scroll about how the pyramids were actually made, or some sort of ancient machinery, or definitely for that first edition scroll of Mark or the Didache would be really interesting. Well, I want to thank everybody. This was a super successful first live stream, and if it was something that you enjoyed, I would definitely do it again, and maybe we could even do something like a Zoom or a Google Meet where maybe it can be a little bit more interactive. But that's something I'll look into more, and I'm definitely going to look into more of the book technology. And if there's something else that you're interested in, obviously always send in an email to my email address, steve at a2zhistorypage.com, or Facebook, which some of you are on, or some people are on YouTube. Those will probably be the two big ones for live streaming. But I know I had a lot of fun. I was very nervous to do this, but it was super fun. I hope the video and the audio quality were good and good enough. And I will talk to you next time.